the last thing that I want to go over this wonderful week. As we know, the quarter just ended. First quarter. Ends of quarters are very important. It kind of gives you the track at the beginning of the year, how these companies are going to perform. I have an idea of the top five companies in my head for the first quarter of this year. Last year I did over a whole year, a top five list. I'm thinking of one for the first quarter based on all the news we covered and the ones that stood out to me the most, the ones that did the most innovation throughout the first quarter. There's going to be a scale on everything that I go through. And they they want to know how these tech stocks did. I'm curious. Note there's going to be a big carry from Nvidia. And most of the tech stocks did do good because most of them are the Magnificent Seven stocks. And one of the things to really think about is Tesla crapped the bed this year. So numbers may, who knows, however it all may look. Who knows how it may all look. But let's just dive into this. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, everything for the algorithm. I really appreciate it. And let's see how they were impacted.
Let's start with Baltimore, Denise. Let me put it this way. You've modeled the prior shocks of the pandemic, the impact that had on supply chain. Do you consider Baltimore a data point that may show up down the line in these markets, or are you kind of sanguine about the lasting effect here?
I would say more in the sanguine camp. When you see supply shocks that affect the overall...
But the scale seems small. Look, it is March 27th. Unbelievably, we're almost at the end of the first quarter, 2 consecutive quarters of gains if you use the NASDAQ 100 as our kind of technology-focused proxy. What's your assessment of where we are in the technology sector right now as we approach the beginning of April, unbelievably?
Yeah, statistically, it almost looks like it's early innings to me. I think that there was a lot of concern from investors that technology stocks have moved too far too fast. And what you're seeing when the earnings came through, they more than delivered on the earnings that were expected. And the hockey stick we've seen in terms of the second derivative of earnings improvement is really something we haven't seen since coming out of the pandemic. And then before that, coming out of the financial crisis. So despite the fact that we didn't have a recession, this looks like a recessionary earnings recovery, historically speaking. And when you go back and you look at those, they tend to be very durable and lasting. So when you backtest all of what we've seen, and it's not just from the Mag 7, but when you look at that, it usually is the beginning of something that is durable into year 2 and year 3. And I think that's what investors need to start considering, not only for technology, but for the broader market.
So it's a question of weighing up data against your own sentiment, right? And when I was reflecting on earnings season, so much of the story was around artificial intelligence. And you see so many of the infrastructure names, not just NVIDIA, I'm talking about the server design companies, others in the stack, basically giving us a strong outlook for this year. But actually, at EPS level, outlook level, the numbers seemed good as well. Which was the more important factor?
No, I think that the more important factor was that it was across the board and diffuse, and that it was through all of technology. I mean, we have data going back for most of technology to the 90s and even some to the 60s. But when you look at the breakpoints in terms of operating margin expansion, which I really think is the driver behind the earnings recovery for technology as a sector, you'll see from the 10th percent breakpoint to the 90th percent breakpoint at the median level, all operating margins are now actually improving. And that's really the diffuse driver for the entire sector. And this is improvement off a pretty high level. There is nothing like that we saw in 99 or 2000. We're generating a lot more free cash flow in the sector off a higher operating margin base. We did see a contraction in operating margins, and now we're seeing that beginning stages of recovery.
And yet, despite us talking about FOMO in January, I'm talking about the fund manager surveys, net positions, I'm seeing a lot of outflows from technology funds. Why are you not worried about that?
Yeah, so when you look at it, there was, I think, the biggest outflow ever in the last month that we've seen historically. And that's true on a nominal basis, right? But when you rescale it for percent of assets or just even you rescale it for inflation, it starts to look fairly innocuous relative to sort of the headlines that investors were reading. And even though it is a bottom quartile level, so meaning that there was a significant level of outflows we haven't seen in quite some time, when you try and correlate that to anything in terms of relative performance, either past relative performance or even future relative performance, you can't see a very consistent correlation. If anything, over the last 10 years, it's actually been a bigger buy signal than a sell signal. So as much as, yes, it's concerning and headlines are concerning, I do think data can always help to say, okay, well, what are the relationships here? And do I feel secure in terms of betting on this as a top predictor? And I would say, based on my data, I would say be careful with that bet.
So one of the reasons.
And they're going to go off into a bunch of other stuff. But technology seems to be where it's at. And I wanted to go through this because I wanted to have another way of highlighting how big this sector actually is now, how much it's growing. And a lot of news came out earlier when they were like, oh, these CEOs are pulling money out of their stuff. And I think that's what they were just talking about right there. And things, don't get worried about it. But she was saying it's a buy still. And you look at how much growth happened this year alone. Like with the Mag 7, all the other technology stocks, they're all growing right now. They're all seeing prosperous numbers. They're all showing returns. And they're all doing good. Well, not all of them. Tesla. I would love to talk to Elon about more of this. Like, I want to know how he feels about the performance of Tesla right now compared to the other Mag 7, potentially getting out of the Mag 7. I want to know how he feels about this because everything else seems like it's on the up right now. Every other company seems like they're up right now. I'm worried. I'm curious. I'm worried. And that's something that I'm really going to think about this throughout this year. And that's something I'm also going to really think about when I think about these top 5 companies for the Q1 because as much as we cover Tesla and Apple and stuff like that, I don't think they're going to make it. And another thing, I believe, if I'm not wrong, in my top 5 video, I had Tesla and Apple as 3 and 4 on my list of last year. My list is wrong. This year, I'm telling you, my top 5 list for the year is going to be so much different. I had Rivian at 5. This year, I haven't heard much about Rivian. We haven't covered much about them. Wonder why that is. Tesla, sinking boat. Ever since I made the video. OpenAI, AWS, they're still up there. They're still up there. Heavy competitors, things like that. Places you wouldn't really think of. But Tesla, Apple, no. They were on my list. You can look at my first video of this year and look at their list. That list. They were in the top 5. They were in the top 5. I kid y'all not. They were up there. It makes me feel ashamed, but don't worry, my picks are gonna get better. And another thing you have to focus on. This is last year performance compared to this year. We're in a whole new year, whole new everything. So we're gonna see how this all is about, and we're gonna grow from this. But that's it for today. That's it for this week. Look forward to the new videos coming out this week and everything. If you missed any part of this episode, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share, all of that. Appreciate you all greatly. Really don't know how much I appreciate it. And see you all next week. Have a blessed weekend. Have a blessed week. Be safe. Appreciate everybody who supports and all of that. And peace.